I truly appreciate you. I truly appreciate you taking the time and getting on here tonight. And hopefully, in this next hour, we can have a few, thoughts to help your kids thrive in sports. Just a little bit about I am a native New Yorker. I grew up on Long Island. I played college soccer at Fordham University. I played in the USISL after that down in North Carolina. I've coached for 30 years, youth, high school coach. My first coaching job was St. Anthony's High School in Long Island. I coached at University of Vermont for 4 years, and then a lot of years of youth soccer and ODP, and ran local regional training center for the Portland Timbers out here in Oregon as well. So been around the game a long time. About 14, 13 years ago, I was just kind of burnt out running clubs and coaching all the time. And so I started this organization called Changing the Game Project. Well, actually, what I did was I wrote a book for parents based on sort of my experience of watching kids develop in this process. And so I wrote a book, and the publisher's like, that's great. How are you going to sell a book? And so that's how Change the Game Project was born, with a blog and social media. And now we have a podcast called Way of Champions that we've released an episode for 440 straight weeks. And just out there, I work not just in soccer, but across a ton of different sports. I work with a lot of international schools. And starting here, next week, I'm on the road almost every week until November, speaking, doing coach development, parent education, things like that at schools and big conferences and stuff like that. So, as Nate mentioned, I've done 4 books now, and I did kind of this all kicked off with a TED Talk in 2014 on changing the game in youth sports, because I was a parent as well, or I am a parent as well. I have 2 kids in college now. So what's really interesting is I started this when my oldest was 6, and now she's 19. And so I've written books and done the research and traveled the world, and then also tried to, sometimes things look great on paper, but they don't work on grass. And so I've had to navigate this as a parent as well, as my kids through injuries, through times when they were really into something, through times when they weren't as excited about it. My goal as a parent, and their mom was a Division I athlete as well, was that we were going to use sport as a vehicle to make them better people. We were going to use sport as a vehicle to put them in situations where they were challenged, where they faced adversity, where things were not easy, where they made a B team, where they had difficult teammates, where they had difficult coaches, and use that to develop people who were also active and healthy for life. So that's been really an unbelievable part of the journey. And now, with my kids' youth sports journey and high school sports journey over, I can look back at it, at all the things I screwed up, and also the things that I think did okay. And hopefully we can share some of those with you here this evening. But as Nate said too, like, you don't have to wait to the end for questions. So if we're talking about a certain specific thing and you have a question about that, do the little Zoom hand raise, and we'll try to get to that right there, so we stay topical and we're not jumping around. Okay.
Okay. Um, First question. What causes kids to quit? And what can I do to help my kid continue playing?
Yeah. So I mean, we've probably all heard this like statistic that we lose about 3/4 of kids to organized sports by the time they roll into high school, middle school years, especially girls. When girls hit their growth spurt and puberty and all that sort of stuff, it's a high dropout time. Um, and so I think one of the biggest things is you know, start with this. When we ask kids why do you play? Like why do you play sports? The number one answer that we know is fun, right? It's got to be fun. And they have a lot of choices of other things that can be fun in their lives, and so sports competing with that. And so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is, well, what is fun? And when we think, oh, fun is, kids is fooling around and slappy clappy, but in the research, that's actually not what they say. Fun is like good organized practices. Fun is being treated with respect. Fun is getting playing time. Fun is, coaches who listen and communicate well. Fun is, this positive team dynamics and positive team environment that brings joy. Fun is competing. Now, on this, this woman, Amanda Visick, did this research and she asked kids, well, define fun. She was the first one who asked them to define fun. And the kids in this research came up with 81 characteristics. And just so you know, the research was done in Washington, D.C. She works at George Washington and was on a club much like yours. So these kids were some multi-sport, but they were, age 8 to 18-year-old travel soccer players, and came up with 81 things that made it fun. And number 48 on the list was winning. Right. So like I've never coached a soccer game where I thought there was 47 things more important than winning. Right. But apparently, kids do sometimes. Right. Now, what was high on the list was competing, right? They like, you know, they understand that, hey, if we win this week 2-1 and we lose next week 2-1, that's okay. I want it to be competitive. I want it to be close. It's not fun to win all our games 10-0, and it's also not fun to lose all our games 10-0, right? So it's finding this balance of it. So so I think that's, number one, right? If I want my kids to stay in sport, joy has to be part of it. And what's really interesting, like we've had, well, probably 3 times now, we've had Steve Kerr on the podcast from Golden State Warriors. And Steve, the number one value of the Golden State Warriors is joy, right? So here they are winning NBA championships, and it's on his wall. The first thing is we get to play a sport for a living. Like this is about joy. Now it's also about competing. We want to win a championship, but joy matters. So at the highest level of sport, joy still matters. And I get a lot of people are like, oh, well, when does it stop being about joy and start being about competition? And the answer to that is never. Never. You can do both. They're not mutually exclusive, right? You can compete and still say, can't wait to do that again, even though that was hard, even though that was challenging, even though that was that. So that's number one. You want your kids to stay, got to seek joy. Number two is ownership, right? Autonomy. So they have to be, it's got to be their goals and their dreams and their desires, not ours. And this is hard as a parent. Sometimes that maybe they find a love for something that is not our love. I mean, but they have to own it. Like they it has to be their thing. So I live in Bend, Oregon. We have a ski mountain 30 minutes away. I'm a passionate skier. I wanted my kids to ski so badly, and we put them in lessons when they were little. And then at 8 or 9, like a lot of kids in town would go into like the ski racing program or the free ride program, and my kids didn't want to do it. And I was so disappointed and whatever, because this is the thing I love to do more than anything. But I was like, you know what? It's got to be their thing. And I'm a passionate skier, not because, no one in my family skied. It's something I found and fell in love with. And so we just backed off and we went a couple times a year. And then all of a sudden at 13, 14, you know, their friends started going and they started wanting to go more. And then, by the time they were 16, they're like, Dad, it's a powder day. Can we cut school and go to the mountain? Right. Now I knew I had done a good job. Right. But like this is, it became their experience that I got to participate in. And still, my daughter is taught skiing for 3 years there. My son's going to University of Utah, and I don't think it's purely for the academics, right? So, like, I think this ownership is so important. So, how our kids got to enjoy it, and they got to own it, And then those two things together breed intrinsic motivation, right? And that intrinsic motivation that's the gasoline on the fire. That's what has them pick up the ball and go to the kickback wall, work on their skills, want to do more stuff, things like that. And those three things produce mastery, and that's how someone sticks with it. So when your kid wants to walk away, it's usually a lack of joy, a lack of their goals, and a lack of motivation.
Okay. Um, Going on, looking at a longer term, what leads to a player thriving over the long term? And what are tools to help kids do their best?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when we just talked about those three ingredients, so maybe over, I think first of all, that idea of long term is huge. I think one of the challenges in youth sport, and if I say the word youth sport, I'm saying up to age 18, is we look at their sporting journey as just this small thing. And so but I think the sporting journey is your whole life, right? Like, um, you can play pickup soccer, into your 60s or 70s, right? So instead of looking as the soccer journey as something that's over at 18, what if we looked at it as something that goes for 50 years? This slice is really small, right? So really what I'm focusing on is love of the game. Well, if I lose ownership, I lose love. If I lose joy, I lose love. One of the biggest challenges is, as parents, and it's too bad I can't sort of poll everyone here, um, but is like it is just our patience and understanding. So if I came to Brooklyn and went to your 10-year-old soccer tryouts, um, I don't even have to watch the tryout. I probably would get 90% of the kids right in the selection process on your 10 and under team if I just looked at their when they were born versus the calendar cutoff date. Because 90% of the kids will probably be born in the first quarter of the year if January 1 is the cutoff date, right? And probably 99% of them will be born before June. Now, if US Soccer tweaks this next year and it becomes August 1st, most of the kids will be born between August and January, right? And all of a sudden, those kids born in February who were advantaged now get disadvantaged. So we call this relative age, right? And it applies in schools and applies everywhere that where you are born compared to the arbitrary calendar cutoff date, the earlier you're making selections, talent selections, the more likely the older kids are going to get selected and identified as talented when really all they are is older. Now, once we get through puberty, 17, 18, 19, those differences even out because everyone's done growing and things like that. So January 1st, when my kids were going through, was the cutoff date. My daughter was born in December, right? She was out of 34 kids in her age group in the club. She was the 33rd tallest. She was the smallest kid. She was the 33rd oldest. She was on the B team until about 15 when she grew. And then everyone's like, wow, she got so much better. I'm like, no, she just finally grew. And everyone else, some of you were done growing at 12, right? So she made the jump. And so I coached both teams that age group through middle school. The year before I took over, both teams lost all their games. The year after I was done, their A team was the state champions in Oregon. And seven of the 16 kids on that roster were on the B team when I started because they grew, because they loved the game, because they were dedicated and they got better and they kept going and kept going. So for us as parents, just that patience of the developmental process of like, I can't help them grow, but what are the things that they can work on before they grow? Their technique, their coachability, are they a good teammate? Are they fit? Are they strong? All that sort of stuff. And then just be patient. And there's so many stories of top level. I mean, in soccer. So one of my favorites in soccer, Southampton Academy in England, had a kid, and at 11 years old, he was the fastest kid in the whole age group. And at 15, he was going through this growth spurt, and he was awkward, and he had gone from the fastest to the eighth or ninth fastest, and he was really struggling. And they had a vote because in England at 16 you get called a YTS, a youth trainee, and you get a scholarship for three. It's a 3-year contract basically that we are going to keep you in the club. They were split. Three coaches said keep him. Three coaches said cut him. And they brought in the scout who first found him, and they said, "Can what do you think?" And he said, "I think he's got all these tools. He's just going through a growth spurt. He's injured. He's not running well, but a lot of the stuff's there." So on a 4-3 vote, Southampton FC decided to keep this kid, and his name was Gareth Bale, right? And a couple of years later, he got sold to Real Madrid, well, Tottenham, and then Real Madrid for $100 million, right? And since he won what 5 Champions Leagues and all this sort of stuff in international, Gareth Bale almost got cut at 16, right? And so, as that parent, like I just want to be patient. I want to see the process out. I want to look at this as a long journey and not an emergency in these next couple months. So if my kid makes the B team, and the B team means that he or she is going to play a lot more and have a bigger role and take set pieces and do all that, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing, right? When my daughter made the B team, I stood in line first to sign her up because I was exactly where she was going to get better. If she was on the A team, would have been a disaster.
Okay. So you shared right before this in the coach seminar we just did about how close your nearest away game is in Bend, Oregon, 3 hours. So I'm sure you were driving your kids to away games. They were quite long car rides. What advice do you have for parents, car rides after games? Um, how how to best be there for the kids?
Yeah, so I live in Central Oregon, Bend, Oregon. Yeah, Portland's 3 hours away, Eugene's 3 hours, Salem, Corvallis. So yeah, away games are a long way away. So we spent a lot of time in the car. My kids were always much happier if there was other kids in the car, not just dad, right, or mom or whatever. I think that car journey, both to and from games, like let's go back to the ownership thing. Like that should belong to your kids, right? I remember coaching this team. There were like 12, 13-year-old girls, and we were so good. But every time we had this away game, these same three girls would just like against a good team, they would just struggle. And then I realized it was the dad who was driving them to the games. He would be on this car ride, like, okay, this team we're going to play, it was like they were giants and they hadn't, they scored 80 goals and hadn't given up a goal in 3 years and they're so good. And then he'd turn them over to me, go get them, coach. They're ready. I'm like, you know, they're crapping their pants. And then I realized, and I got him to either stop driving or stop talking. So that travel to the game, right? Feed them, hydrate them, let that time be there. Get them off screens, right? This is really huge. When you're looking at this little television screen or phone screen, it actually narrows your field of vision, your peripheral vision, your proprioception is off. So like really a minimum hour, if not hour and a half before a game, you should never be looking at a phone, right? Because it actually narrows their vision. So nutrition, hydration, turn them over. And then like the car ride home after, like when they ask kids like what's your worst memory of sports, this is usually the number one answer. Because we got them locked in the car and I mean you're in New York, you're stuck in traffic and you're going to make this a teachable moment. And what kids say all the time is like this is usually the least teachable moment. So letting them that time belong to them as well. And every kid's different. Like my two kids, my daughter would get in the car and she would be like, "So, Dad, how do you think I did?" She led the conversation. She brought it up. She got to put it to bed. And regardless of whether like she had her best game or her worst game, I would always just be like, same three questions, right? Dad, how do you think I did? Well, what do you think went well today for you? What do you think needs work? And third question is, what's one thing you can focus on and practice this week to get better that you learned from today? Same three questions, right? Because something always went well and something always needs work and something there's always something to work on in practice. So that was like the very basic conversation all the time. My son, like, Dad, how did I do today? I don't think like ever occurred to him to ask in the car on the way home, right? What occurred? Where's the food? How soon can it be? Can we get the food? Right? Like that was what he wanted to know. Right. But we had like an agreement of, okay, what what do like when's a good time to chat about stuff? When's a good time to talk about this? And it was also hard because I coached both my kids, so I always had to like, are you asking me when we're having a conversation? Are you asking me as your coach or are you asking me as your dad? Right? Someone said the other day at a talk, which I really liked. They said I take the 3H approach with my kids. Do you need a hug? Do you need to be heard? Or do you need help? Right? Let them guide that. I thought that was really a really good way to put it. So let them own that. If they bring it up, have the conversation. When they put it to bed, put it to bed. If they don't bring it up and you actually know what you're talking about, have something to add, figure out a time to have that conversation. My son and I, it was always like that night at dinner or maybe the next day. That's when we would have a conversation. The emotions are much less, the physical exhaustion is gone, and it's actually like much more of a teachable moment. So I think that's just doing it. Now, if you're like, some people listen to this and they're like, oh my God, like I'm just debriefing my kid every day. Like, don't stop cold turkey. Tell them that you're going to do that, or they'll think you're like really mad. So just be like, hey, like I realize I've been bringing this up. Is that something that you like, or would you rather talk about this at a different time? Yeah, but let that time belong to them.
Okay. It's a good point about the cold turkey. I wouldn't have thought about that either.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just, and look, I mean, like I said in the beginning, I've screwed this up. I could bring my son's upstairs, just got home from work. I could bring him down here and ask how many times I made him cry in the car. So I am certainly not perfect. I was plenty of times an idiot with
Um,
the best of intent.
Different topic. What is, from your perspective, appropriate behavior and communication with the coach? Both been a coach and a parent as well.
Yeah, so we talked about this with the coaches the last hour, and what I asked them to do, and I think what Nate's asked them to do is like in this preseason meeting, like right before the season, like set out what are the boundaries, what are the expectations, how's it work. I told them there's no such thing anymore as like I'm the coach, I don't talk to parents. Like that's silly, because if it was the math teacher and our kid was failing math, we'd never say, oh, you know what, I don't talk to parents when your kid's failing math. Like no, we want to help. So that there should be communication with appropriate boundaries. Number one, the timing, right? I think if you're upset about something, 24 hours to let it simmer, to let the emotions down is like the minimum amount of time before anyone can have a instructive conversation about stuff. Number two, whenever possible, human conversation over a phone call is always better than long emails and text messages and electronic conversation. Number three, posting how much you hate your coach on social media is never a helpful thing, no matter how quote private it is. So I think all these things, having these appropriate conversations, and then number four, in terms of boundaries. And in this book, Champion Sports Parent, that we published last year, it's like, well, what are the appropriate things to discuss? My child, their attitude, their effort, their ability, their playing time, everything about them. What's not appropriate, the team's tactics, the other kids on the team and what's wrong with them, all that sort of stuff. Now, if your kid's being picked on or bullied by some other kids, yeah, you can let the coach know 100%. But that has nothing to do with, and Jenny shouldn't be playing striker, right? And so those I think are the appropriate conversations for you to have. And just, when can we have them? And if there's something really amiss, like, then bring in that third party, right? Bring in a third person in that room to just know what was discussed as well. I think this, when I talk to college coaches right now and say, what's the biggest challenge? They say kids now have an incredibly difficult time having difficult conversations face to face because they can do it all electronically, right? So being told bad news, being told that you're redshirting, being told that you're not going to play, that you're not going to travel, they've never had to have those conversations and learn to advocate for themselves. So sports such a great way to do that. So certainly at a certain time, right? I'm not saying for your 7-year-old, but a middle school kid, getting them reps at going to have that conversation with a coach. Coach, how can I earn some more playing time? What specifically can I do? Now, what I would do as a coach then is have that conversation, and then I would write and say, dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, had a great conversation with Jimmy today. Here's the things we discussed. Here's the goals. This is let's reconvene in a month and see how it goes. Right? Because a lot of times what happens is I tell a kid, hey, do an extra practice, work on your left foot. And they do that for like 3 days. And then the next week they're like, okay, coach, well, I did that. Yeah, you need to do it for like 6 months. You need to do it for a year. You need to do it for 10 years. Like this is not something we're going to solve this week. Right. So, but I keeping the parents in the loop. But man, when you can give your kids those opportunities to have those reps, it's so huge. Again, with my kids now in college, it's like, constantly encouraging them on other things, right? My daughter, wants to switch positions at her restaurant job. I'm like, well, go talk to your boss, right? What do you know? I'm not going to solve that problem for you. Go advocate for yourself. And she's like, well, it feels weird. I'm like, well, if you're not going to advocate for yourself, who's going to advocate for you? Right? Because I'm not always going to be there. So go do that, right? Go have a conversation with your professor at college if you don't understand why you struggle in this class. Go put a face to the name so that they know that you care. And man, sports is like such a wonderful place to get those first reps as a kid.
Mhm. So true.
All right, thank you very much. Similar on a similar topic of what do you think is appropriate behavior and communication with admins? When to escalate beyond the coach if you think that can't be solved right there.
Yeah, so I think you start with a coach, and again, Nate and I have had many conversations, and realizing when we have, you know, hundreds of players in this program in this age and big programs, it's never going to be perfect for everyone, and we're striving towards being better every day, but it's not about being perfect every day, and so things are going to be missed, right? So you have that conversation with a coach. And hopefully, what that coach is doing is aligned with the values of the organization, the philosophies of the organization around playing time, around standards of behavior, standards of commitment, things like that. Well, we have those conversations, and then from there we say, okay, it's we had this, it's still not being held. How do we move up to the next person? And so who's the next person in line? where I think problems arise is like there's this chain of command, and the chain of command starts with, your player to coach, parent to coach, and then who's the next person up above the coach, who the age group director or the director of coaching or things like that. The problem is when it gets escalated all the way to the top, and that person's like, wait a sec, well, there was four layers in between there to solve this problem. Have you had any discussions with that? And you see this more often in like high schools where, when I'm 53 and when I was growing up, it was like, if there was a problem, my dad said, go talk to the coach. You know, and then maybe I will. And then if it didn't go to the coach, it would go to the AD, right? Then there was a period where people were skipping the coach and going to the AD. Then they were skipping the AD and going to the principal. And now a lot of times it just goes like straight to a school board member. So the school board member hears about a problem before the coach hears there's a problem, before the AD hears there's a problem, before the principal hears there's a problem. And it's just super unhelpful. So I think work up work up that chain of command or whatever. Um, you know, I think the question, and this is a really hard question as a parent to ask yourself when things are not going well, is this situation that my son or my daughter is in, is this situation difficult or is it dangerous? You know what I mean? Like, is it difficult? Their playing time. I think they should be starting, but they're not. They're not getting, this other player's playing in front of them. Um, the coach is being really tough on them. All that. That's difficult. Sports is a great way to deal with difficulty and adversity. Versus dangerous. Coach, my kid's getting bullied. The coach is, you know, demeaning my kid, talking about their fat or their this or their that my kid's coming home in tears, humiliated in front of their teammates, whatever. That starts to border on dangerous. And that's, I think, the appropriate time for the parent to be like, no, this is not appropriate to continue. And the hardest thing I think as a parent is it's not, there's clearly black and white, but there's a lot of gray, right? And how do I navigate the gray? This is bordering on dangerous, but right now it's difficult. Let me monitor it closely versus like, nah, now's the time I need to step in. And, I mean, both my kids were like team captains of their high school teams. And I think about their experiences. Both of them had my daughter's junior year, had a very difficult coaching situation with just a coach who wasn't very good at the soccer piece, and my son's senior year had a difficult coaching situation. And they would come to me, and it was just like I could intervene, but I'm not going to. I'm going to teach them how to have a conversation, how to have a meeting, how to see the coach's perspective, how to be a leader, right? How to have a voice, and navigate. Like, listen, you are a human being. You have rights. You have to learn to advocate for yourself. And at the same time, you have to respect your coach and the position that he or she has been put in and the authority they're given. But it's not their right to treat you a certain way or humiliate you or threaten you or things like that. So stand up for yourself as a human being. And, it worked out okay in both situations, but, I didn't know that was going to happen in the beginning.
I like your distinction of dangerous versus difficult. And I think a lot of the gray is kids can get really emotional of difficult situations as well. And it can be hard to, parse through, the emotions that they're having and whether they're going to be able to get through it or not. So I
Yeah,
like,
and I think this is super important, Nate. Like right, as a parent, we have this little baby, and all we do is protect them. And then bit by bit, we got to strip back the bubble wrap and hope they don't break a bone. But they do break bones sometimes, and it's like, how do we let them go bit by bit so that they can become fully functioning human beings. I mean, we don't want our kid to go off to college and not know how to do laundry, not how to have a difficult conversation, not have ever. I heard this corporate CEO said the worst thing in business these days is hiring a 24-year-old who's never experienced adversity. That is the worst employee I could ever hire, right? So I want to know, when have they struggled? Why have they struggled? What's been hard? And how do we peel back the layers of, like, okay, you know what? Because it hurts to see your kid cry. It hurts to see them upset. It hurts to see them get their heart broken. And that's life. And so this is just a rep. And I want to get them as many reps as possible when they're living under my roof, so that I can give them perspective and share my stories and my reps of things that I screwed up, or things that were disappointments, or times I got my heart broken, so that when I'm not there, it's not their first rep.
Mhm. Okay. Um, any advice on how to experience the thrill of competition while kind of doing the right thing on the sidelines for our kids? Any best practices there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, first of all, I think, like, the biggest advice I give there is know your role, right? So when you show up at your kid's game, you can wear there's four roles. You can be, you can be the athlete, you can be the coach, you can be the fan, you can be the referee. That's all. You can't ever be two of those things. All right. So when the coach starts reffing, no bueno. When the parents start coaching, no bueno. When the athletes start reffing, no good. Right. So knowing your role, so that when I show up as a fan, my job is to be there and be supportive and cheer, but not coach. Like when I was working at Manchester United, and with their little kids, they have a rule: we don't coach when the ball's rolling. Right? When the ball's rolling, the kids are making the decisions. They're figuring it out. They're doing it because they have to, in a split second, assess what's happening, come up with possible solutions, pick one, technically execute, assess their choice, and do it again over and over and over. They can't take input in that moment, right? So when parents are on the sideline yelling, "Pass it, shoot it, kick it, dribble it, whatever," all you're doing is, like, confusing your kid. You're slowing your kid down. You're not making them better. You're actually making them worse. We add cognitive interference. It slows down physical reaction time. This has been proven over and over. So the best thing we can do is be there and cheer and just support our kids, be engaged. Little kids, when they ask little kids, "What do you want your parents to do on the sideline?" A lot of times little kids say, "Cheer for the other team as well." you know, Cheer for all the good plays. When I ask middle school and high school kids, like, I do a lot of talks for student athletes or just schools, and I say, "What do you want your parents to say on the sideline of your game?" They immediately yell out, "Nothing." They say, "Nothing. Don't say anything." Right? I've never in 13 years ever had a kid be like, "Man, it's super helpful when my dad yells at the ref. Like, that's, like, really helpful." Right? So it's like, just be there and be engaged and be present and be proud. And when I go and I watch kids playing, especially younger ones, and they make a mistake, I always look at, what do they do next, right? And if they get on with it and go press the ball, go get it back, amen. If they look to their coach, I'm worried about, wow, why are they worried that their coach is disappointed in this moment? But if their first glance is to mom or dad, like, is mom or dad mad that I made a mistake, and they're on the sideline like this, that's really a bad sign, right? And when I hear a kid, no matter how talented they are, turn to the sideline and tell one of their parents to shut up, like, that's probably a kid who's going to quit pretty soon because they're just over it. So, yeah, just know your role, and even ask your kids, like, "What would you like me to do on the sideline? cheer, whatever. But most of them aren't like, yeah, joystick me through the game, mom. That would be super helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
I see a hand up, Nate, right there. Can you
Yeah.
unmute
JP.
JP? Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, John, thank you so much. I have to say, your videos on under resources on BrooklynUnitedAcademy.com have really helped me. And Nate, I would urge us to remind the parents that they're there because there's a lot of great things there. And specifically the one about the car ride home. My
Mm.
son he's 10 now, but he started saying, "Hey, can we talk about what I did well and what I want to work on?" Which that coming from a 9-year old, I thought was pretty awesome. And so we started that, but now he's not asking those questions anymore. So after watching, he does, but not immediately after, typically like the next day or so. And he actually goes home and watches the VO footage um, on his own. He likes to watch it and then write things down and come to talk to me about them, which I think
Cool.
is super cool.
Yeah.
But I used to push that scenario a lot in the back, on the car ride home, and I've learned from your videos not to. But the other thing that I loved about your video about parenting or coaching from the sideline for the parents is the closer you are to the sideline, the more you're going to feel like you're involved in the game and say stuff. So
Hmm.
I've actually, as a parent coordinator, I've actually asked some parents to step away and move further away from the sidelines to help them. And I found that to be super helpful from your video. So I just want to say thanks for that. This is your guidance has been super helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I think it's I think it's awesome what you said because it's like go up there and stand on the hill, and if you're still gonna yell, like you're gonna look like an idiot, but whatever, if that's what you need to do. Like I actually during the whole pandemic stuff where here in Oregon, like the kids were allowed to play again, but the parents weren't allowed in the facility, so everyone was like up on the hill again, and it was like all of a sudden I'm like, hey, everyone, listen, you can hear the kids talking and communicating. You can hear the coach coaching. Like they're figuring it out, which you can't hear when the parents are on the sideline. Blah, 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 blah. So I always thought that was super cool. And like the parents are like 75 yards away, having civilized conversations about adult things and not getting so caught up in their 9-year old's mistake. So yeah, I think that's always a great thing. So thank you for bringing that up.
It's a good segue also to our next question. Um, how can you as a parent be part of contributing to a positive environment among the players and parents? And it's not just the club that you're at and the kids that your kids are playing with, but it's also the parents who are around and the type of environment within each team. So how can you, let's say you're not a parent coordinator, you're a parent on the team. What can you do to help create a positive environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, first of all, so it's funny, like when I would coach, I would always, especially if it was like a young team, like, 11, 12 years old, I would always ask like, okay, show of hands amongst my parent meeting, how many of you is this your first kid in sports? And if like most people raise their hand, like, ooh, this is going to be hard, right? But if like most people are like, nah, it's my third, just keep them alive, whatever. Like I get it. I know how it works, right? So that is like such a thing. I truly believe that in every parent group, 16 families, whatever the number is, there's, 3 to 5 who are like, they totally get it. They're been through the process. They're a bunch of kids. They understand what's important here. There's a couple of the negative end, and most people are in the middle, right? And we want to get the people in the middle, and we want to move them to the positive end. So, what are the standards? How do we act on the sideline? What do we say? How do we treat officials? Do we not coach? All this sort of stuff. And then that sideline becomes uncomfortable, maybe for you know the 2 to 3 people who feel the need to coach and yell and scream and yell at officials and stuff like that. So I think that's the role, right? Is first of all model the right behaviors, model the right fan behavior, model the standards of the club, right? I see all these sports organizations, and they have in their mission statement and on their values respect, and then I go watch them on the sidelines. I'm like, there's no respect here. You're not respecting the kids because you're coaching. You're not respecting officials. You're not respecting the coach. You're not respecting anyone. So it's just a nice web page. So model the behaviors you want to see, and then ask like, hey, how can I contribute? Because I know every club has fundraising events. Well, can I contribute there? Every team, whether you're, as the parent coordinator, JP, right? It's like, hey, can someone, bring food? Can someone make, a dinner reservation for the team after? Can someone be in charge of, a team building event and organize that so the coach doesn't have to? Can someone be in charge of X, Y, and Z, right? So find a way to have a role that fits your thing. But just ask, how can I make this organization better?
Okay. Um, we have one here. How do you handle adversity with your children? I don't know. We covered that before. Do you want to add anything else there? Or?
I mean, I just think because it's an important topic, just the reminder, like use use sports to get your kids reps in adversity. It's the perfect place. The consequences usually aren't that high. And it's just a great way to learn that, life is not all unicorns and rainbows. And being good at dealing with adversity is an incredibly important life skill that will help you far beyond the soccer field, far beyond school, whatever, right? All these businesses talk now about hiring on character, and certainly the ability to make mistakes and recover and deal with hard moments. In the age of AI, where AI can do everything that a lot of people can do, the resilient human being is not something it can do necessarily. So those are the skills that I think are going to be in demand, and sport is just a wonderful place to get them.
Yeah. Okay. Last question for me, is how do I know if my child is on track? Talked about the span of time, and all these different moments, what is dangerous or difficult. But how do I know if things are going well or if they're not?
There's no like perfect answer, right? Because if anyone on here has more than one kid, they're like completely different, right? So even though they were raised the same house and ate the same food and same whatever, their drive, their motivation can be completely different. So this goes back to the first thing we talked about, I think, Nate. Like, do they love it? They love it. Do they want to do it? Do they own it? Are they enjoying themselves? Are they motivated to go pick up a ball and practice and get better? Are they playing at a level where their motivation and their love is equivalent to the level they're playing at? Because it doesn't matter how fast and how strong and how skillful, the differentiator every time you jump up a level is usually mentality, right? So your ability, you're just, can you avoid mistakes? Can you play with pressure? Can you play in higher pressure situations? All that sort of stuff. And so that's, I think, what I'm looking for over and over. Combine that with the patience piece, right? Is my kid like when I was a sophomore in high school? Well, when I was in eighth grade, I wrestled at 98 pounds, and I graduated high school, I weighed 170, right? The best thing my dad said to me when I was a sophomore and I was struggling was like, he's like, John, that kid that you're competing against he's got a mustache. You're a little kid still. Like you can't control that. But what can you control? Because I was like, Dad, I wish I could play more. Can you go talk to my coach? And he was like, he goes, I'll go talk to your coach as soon as you can answer yes to all these things. He's like, do you show up early every day? Do you stay after? Are you the fittest you've ever been? Are you picking up the balls? Do you clean up? Are you the best teammate? Are you all these things? He goes, if you can say yes to all those, I'll go talk to your coach. He's like, but if you can't, start doing those things and figure it out. And lo and behold, when I started doing those things, I got more playing time, right? Because I got better and I earned it and whatever. And so he was really good at saying, like, listen, you can't, you can't, you know, practice your way to, being physically developed, but you will be someday, right? And the next year, all of a sudden, that player was on the bench and I was the one who was playing, right? Because I was the better player. I just finally grew. So, I think all these things, right? Like my kid is on the path if they love movement. They're active, right? Soccer is just one of the vehicles of movement, right? My kids were both all-state high school soccer players, neither of whom wanted to play in college because they wanted to go to big schools and do other things. And, you know, but they both, it was like my daughter, her senior year after high school season, said, I don't want to play club anymore. I want to go teach skiing at the mountain. So she went and got a job there. And then that spring, she's like, I think I want to play on the tennis team. And so she goes to tennis tryouts, and the coach is like, you are really bad at tennis, but you're a hell of an athlete. We'll take you, you know? And my son was like, I don't want to play club my senior year. I want to snowboard more. And he goes, I want to take up boxing. So he took up boxing, and it's like, great, And so I have kids who are healthy and well-rounded, athletic, love to go to the gym, love to work out and do stuff. That was my goal. That was the path that I knew that I wanted the path. Neither of them was like, I want to get to the next level. I want to do this or do that. I've coached plenty of kids who were so driven and that's what they wanted to do. I was telling the coaches before, one of the kids I coached in soccer for 5 years was just a first round draft pick for Major League Baseball and just signed a $4 million contract. He was so driven. He was so focused. At 15, he's like, I'm done with soccer. I'm all in on this, right? He didn't go to parties in high school. He took online school his senior year. He traveled all over. His parents were like, you want to back off? He's like, no, this was my dream. This is my focus. This is my goal. He is just different. That's not normal. That drive is not normal. And you can't give your kids, some people I think are kind of born that way. And, I remember I went to the same high school as Christian Pulisic's dad. And I remember talking to Mark about Christian. He's like, it's not for everyone. Everyone sees the big contract and the Champions League trophy. They don't see all the injuries. They don't see the press. They don't see the people attacking you online. They don't see coaches changed and being back on the bench and people saying that they wasted $70 million on you. They don't see the criticism when you don't show up to the national team this summer. It's like, it's not for everyone, right? Christian had this crazy driven mentality. So, yeah.
Okay. That's the end of my questions and also the end of the time. Can I open to see if there are any last questions here before we go? There's at the bottom a react button. You can do the raised hand and then I'll see it to call on you. Any other questions? Going once.
Oh, there's one. Come
Todd.
on, it's Brooklyn. I
Yeah.
expected there was like, is there like a middle finger reaction or what? Like,
Hey, John, it's good to see you, man.
yeah,
I got a quick question that is probably a long answer, so apologies, I'm throwing this out at the end. Can you talk a little about specialization at
yeah.
ages, call it 5 to 12 or 5 to 13? Because I think we're really missing a big part of the youth sports equation where it's just not set up for kids to play multiple sports. And I think
Mhm.
all the data shows that Division One athletes have played multiple sports. So can you just give your perspective and maybe help us think about that a little bit?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I would highly recommend a book called Range by David Epstein. Um, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World, I think is is the subtitle of it. And it's a really good book. And it looks not just in sports, but whatever. And what he talks about is like how we tend in the world to focus on the unicorns, the Tiger Woods, who's, on Johnny Carson at 3 years old hitting golf balls. But that's not the normal path. The normal path is sort of like a sampling, a multi-movement path that then helps a kid find their passion and what they're good at. Every sport is different, right? So there's no story of a kid who starts playing soccer at 17 years old and plays for Manchester United. Because it's a perception action sport, you need to start early. Same with something like ice hockey. There are stories of like, there was a guy who played in the NBA and then at 26 decided to play volleyball and made the Olympic team because he happened to be 6'7" with super long arms and could jump 37 inches in the air. He had transferable skills. So the younger your kids are, the more important it is to sample. Um, and this is all the evidence piece, right? That I'll try to get to here, Todd, is like this is so we have the evidence of this. Um, it's harder and harder these days to have a multi-sport experience because every sport is asking for longer commitments and things like that. But your kid still needs a multi-movement experience. So what they don't necessarily need is to play three travel sports. But a kid who says, I like soccer, we need to start thinking of like yoga and martial arts and some other movement patterns, just strength and conditioning and stuff like that. Those are other sports as well. Hopping on your bike, doing something with your family, going skiing, whatever it is, going surfing. Those are all multi-movement. It doesn't have to be some big paid travel thing or whatever. But regardless, even if your kid, like I always say to people, they say, "Oh, but my 8 year old only wants to play soccer," and I'm like, my kids were 8; they only wanted to eat pizza, but I was supposed to be the adult in the room to know like you got to eat some vegetables. So we have to think of multi-movement as the vegetables, and sometimes they don't necessarily want it. But what we do know is that kids who, only participate in one sport prior to puberty, they drop out at a higher rate, they get injured at a higher rate, twice the rates of overuse injuries, things like that. If your kid was growing up at Manchester United, um, go to Manchester United, it's like they do parkour, right? It's like a gymnastics gym. They do tumbling. They play a lot of soccer, but they become athletes first because if they don't become athletes, they can't, sustain the training load to be good, right? When I meet someone who's like, oh, this kid, phenomenal 14-year-old soccer player, I'm like, balance on your kicking foot right now. Be amazed how many kids can't do that, right? If they're right footed, they can balance well on their left foot because they're used to doing that. Balance on your right foot. Well, they can't. Well, guess what? You're far more likely to do your knee in right now because you're not athletically developed. So we have the ideal world, and now we have the real world of trying to run a business, trying to keep employees employed. So in the United States, so many organizations, right, are forced to build their own fields or rent these expensive facilities, and so they need to fill them. And so as the parent, you're the general contractor, right? You have to be the one making sure your kid gets that multi-movement experience as much as possible. I was lucky enough to raise my kids in a place where they could do multiple sports, where it was easier to do that. It's harder in big cities. It's harder in New York. There's more competition for spots and things like that. I think you all, and I mean this sincerely, in my conversations with Nate, like you have someone who really cares about doing right by the kids. And as an organizational director, sometimes what we want and what the leagues require or whatever is not always aligned. And I think it's just a hard thing. But as that parent, get your kid the multi-movement experience as often as possible. Think of different ways to do it, and develop athletes first and soccer players second. That'll keep them in sport. That'll keep them healthy, and it's a better pathway, you know, for that tiny percentage to move on and move upwards.
I like the way you put that with multi-movement. I've seen some of the literature about multi-sport, and I've seen people go, all right, 3 travel teams, and
Yeah.
it's it shouldn't be adding more pressure onto the kid. It should be cooling off the pressure,
Yeah.
whatever other thing they're doing, I think. And I like the parkour, another sport as well. But it could be parkour or riding a bike is also adding cooling off with an athletic component as
Yeah.
well.
Go to martial arts one day a week. Go to yoga with mom or dad. You know, I love dragging my kids to yoga. They don't. Well, my daughter likes it now. My son, not so much.
Can we take another question, John? I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Please.
Um, anyone raise their hand if you have a question? Thank you, Todd. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for coming and chatting with our coaches over there, with parents here, and then also with our admin staff later on in the fall. Really appreciate you sharing so much knowledge and wisdom with us. We have a
Oh
question.
yeah. There we go.
Paul.
There's a clap.
Oh, that was a clap?
Oh, it
Okay.
was a clap.
That
Okay.
was a clap.
Cool. Thank you.
But thank you so much for coming. If we're gonna try to get you back again, get fit in your busy schedule again. Really appreciate you taking the time, and
Yeah.
good luck this fall season, flying around the country, working with athletes and programs.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate you taking the time this evening. And good luck this season. Good luck. Have fun. It goes by fast. That's the only other thing I could tell you. It goes by fast. And when you look back on it, the things that matter the most, I think, are the connection and the time with your kids and the good car rides and the fun memories and the things that you thought mattered at under 10 game that they lost 2-1. Your kid didn't play enough. Yeah, they don't seem to really matter anymore.
Mhm. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Take
Cheers.
care, everyone. Enjoy your summers.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you, guys.